There's a version of you that women can't stop thinking about, and there's the version you've been showing them. The gap between those two, that's exactly what this video is about. Most men never figure this out. They spend years doing everything they were told, being kind, being available, being honest about their feelings from day one, and it still doesn't work. Not because those things are wrong, because they're being offered at the wrong time, in the wrong way, from the wrong position. Female psychology doesn't operate the way most men assume it does. It runs deeper. It responds to signals most men never learn to send, signals that have nothing to do with money, looks, or how many times you text back. Machiavelli understood how human beings actually respond to power and perception. 7 laws. Each one pulling back a curtain most men never even knew was there. Don't skip any part of this video. Let's begin. Number 1. Women don't want what they say they want. They want what they feel. Ask a woman what she wants in a man. She'll tell you. Honest, caring, a good listener, someone who shows up consistently and makes her feel valued. And she means it, every word. But watch who she actually falls for, stays up thinking about, drives 40 minutes across town to see on a Tuesday night with no real plan. It's rarely the man she described. This isn't a contradiction. It's just the difference between what the conscious mind articulates and what the emotional body actually responds to. And most men make the catastrophic mistake of targeting the first, while completely ignoring the second. Sigmund Freud observed that the mind is like an iceberg. It floats with 1/7 of its bulk above water. What a woman tells you she wants lives above the surface. What actually moves her, what creates that pull she can't fully explain to her friends, lives somewhere far beneath it. Machiavelli understood this gap between stated preference and actual response better than almost any thinker of his era. He noted consistently that people are moved not by what they consciously believe they want, but by what they feel in the presence of certain kinds of energy. That observation applies to attraction between men and women with uncomfortable precision. A woman who says she wants a gentle, constantly available man, and then finds herself inexplicably drawn to someone quietly, harder to read, visibly occupied with his own direction, isn't being dishonest. She's being human. Her emotional response is simply operating on a frequency her words haven't caught up to yet. This is where most men get stuck. They listen to the words. They optimize for the words. They become exactly what she described, and then wonder why the attraction never materialized the way they expected. The answer isn't to ignore what she says. It's to understand that what she feels is always running a deeper current beneath it. Stop targeting her words. Start learning to speak to what's underneath them. That's where attraction actually lives. And the man who understands that, genuinely understands it, not as a trick, but as a truth, already operates at a level most men never reach. Number 2. She's not attracted to effort. She's attracted to ease. Here's something that will quietly rearrange everything you thought you understood about attraction. The more effort a man visibly puts into impressing a woman, the less attractive he becomes. Not because effort is unattractive, because visible effort communicates something beneath itself that women pick up on almost instantly. It communicates need. And need, that specific energy of a man who requires her positive response to feel okay about himself, is one of the fastest ways to dissolve attraction before it ever fully forms. Think about 2 men pursuing the same woman. One plans elaborate gestures, responds to every message within minutes, rearranges his schedule around her availability, and makes it unmistakably clear that she is his primary focus. The other is genuinely interested, warm, present, engaged, but also visibly occupied with his own life. His attention feels like something she earned, rather than something he was always going to give away freely. Which one does she keep thinking about after the conversation ends? Arthur Schopenhauer, in his Reflections on Human Desire, observed that we seldom think of what we have, but always of what we lack. That observation cuts directly to the center of this dynamic. The man who is fully, completely, exhaustingly present leaves nothing for the imagination. The man who is genuinely engaged but not consumed, who has a life that doesn't revolve around her reaction, creates a space she naturally wants to move into. Machiavelli understood that the appearance of indifference, not manufactured coldness, but the genuine ease of a man who is not desperate for any particular outcome, carries a weight that constant pursuit simply cannot. It signals that he has options, that his time has value, that her approval, while welcome, is not required for him to move through his day with complete confidence. Ease is not laziness. It's the outward expression of a man who has already done the internal work, who knows what he brings, doesn't feel the need to prove it constantly, and trusts that the right woman will recognize it, without being convinced. That trust, worn quietly, is one of the most attractive things a man can carry into any interaction. Number 3. Boys are gentle. Men have edges. There is a quality that separates the men women fall deeply for from the ones they appreciate but never quite desire. It isn't looks. It isn't money, though people reach for those explanations first. It's edges. Not cruelty. Not aggression. Edges. The specific quality of a man who has opinions he won't abandon, standards he won't negotiate, and a sense of self that doesn't reshape itself to accommodate whoever just walked into the room. Most men, somewhere in their attempt to be likable, sand down every sharp corner they have. They agree more than they believe. They laugh at things they don't find funny. They absorb disrespect quietly because the alternative, holding a position that might create friction, feels too risky. And women feel that softness, not as kindness, as the absence of something they were hoping to find. Carl Jung observed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That complete self-acceptance, the version that doesn't require external approval to remain intact, is exactly what creates edges in a man. He disagrees when he disagrees. He holds his ground when challenged, not out of stubbornness, but because his sense of self doesn't depend on the other person's comfort with his position. Machiavelli noted that men who couldn't be moved, whose internal position remained steady regardless of external pressure, commanded a quality of respect that agreeable, accommodating men never could. In the dynamic between a man and a woman, that immovability translates directly into attraction. Women test edges, not always consciously, but they push through small disagreements, through mood shifts, through moments designed to see whether this man will hold his ground or quietly fold to keep the peace. The man who folds loses something in that moment that is very difficult to recover. The man who holds, calmly, without anger, without making it a confrontation, gains something instead. He becomes more real to her, more distinct, more worth the attention she was already considering giving him. Erich Fromm wrote in The Art of Loving that immature love says, "I love you because I need you." Mature love says, "I need you because I love you." The man with edges doesn't need her approval to feel complete, and that completeness, that unshakable wholeness, is precisely what makes her want to be near him. Number 4. Silence is the most powerful thing a man can say. Most men are terrified of silence. They fill every pause, explain every decision, justify every action, as if the absence of words might leave too much space for her to think something unfavorable about them. But here's what that constant filling actually does. It removes mystery. It removes weight. It turns every interaction into something that can be fully understood and therefore fully filed away. And what gets completely understood, completely mapped, stops generating curiosity. Women are drawn toward depth. And depth, by definition, cannot be fully seen from the surface. The man who speaks selectively, who lets certain silences breathe, who doesn't feel compelled to fill every gap with reassurance or explanation, communicates something that volumes of carefully chosen words never could. He communicates that there is more beneath him than what's currently visible. And that sense of more, that feeling that she hasn't quite reached the bottom of him yet, is one of the most powerful drivers of sustained attraction that exists. Søren Kierkegaard wrote in Either Or that the most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly one you'll never have. What he understood about desire is that it lives in incompleteness, in the space between what is known and what is still being discovered. A man who never stops talking closes that space entirely. A man who knows when to go quiet keeps it open indefinitely. Machiavelli observed that the most commanding figures in any room weren't the loudest ones. They were the ones whose silence carried enough weight that people leaned toward them, waiting, wondering, slightly unsettled by what they couldn't yet read. In real terms, this plays out in conversation constantly. The man who pauses before responding, who doesn't rush to fill every lull, who occasionally says less than he could, creates a texture to the interaction that keeps her engaged long after it ends. She'll replay it, try to read what he meant, wonder what he was thinking in that moment he went quiet. That wondering, that's attraction staying alive. Number 5. She needs to feel, not think her way into loving you. Logic doesn't create love. It never has. A man can check every box on the list she described. Stable career, emotionally present, treats her well consistently, shows up without being asked, and still, somehow she feels nothing beyond warmth and appreciation. Meanwhile, a man who makes no logical sense, whose life isn't perfectly arranged, whose future isn't completely certain, makes her feel something in the first 10 minutes that the other man never managed in 10 months. This drives men crazy. And it should, because from the outside it appears completely irrational. But it isn't irrational. It's just operating on a different frequency than logic. Erich Fromm wrote in The Art of Loving that love is an act of faith, and whoever is of little faith is also of little love. What Fromm was pointing at is that love, real, pulling, consuming love, isn't a conclusion a woman reaches after careful evaluation. It's something she falls into. Something that happens to her in the presence of a specific kind of energy. That energy isn't manufactured through correct behavior. It's generated through genuine aliveness, a man who is so fully himself, so clearly moving toward something real, so completely uninterested in performing for approval, that being near him feels like standing near something that's actually on fire. Machiavelli understood that people don't follow those who make the most logical case. They follow whoever makes them feel something. Something certain, something directional, something that suggests this person knows where they're going and has the will to get there. In the dynamic between a man and a woman, that principle operates with striking power. She doesn't think her way into wanting him. She feels her way there, through his presence, his stillness, his edges, the specific way he moves through a room without needing it to validate him. Stop trying to make her think you're the right choice. Make her feel something she can't quite name but can't quite let go of either. That feeling, not the logic, is what stays. Number 6. Masculinity is not toxic. Its absence is. Something has been quietly stripped from men over the last few decades. Not through one dramatic moment, but through a slow, steady accumulation of messages telling men that the qualities most naturally their own were somehow dangerous. Be softer. Be more accommodating. Make yourself smaller so she feels more comfortable. And men listened. They softened. They accommodated. They made themselves smaller. And then they wondered why she stopped looking at them the way she used to. Masculinity, real masculinity, not performance and not aggression, is one of the deepest attractors in female psychology. Not because women want to be dominated, because they want to be near something that feels genuinely strong. Something that holds its shape under pressure. Something that doesn't dissolve the moment the environment becomes difficult. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "The secret for harvesting from existence the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously." What he meant beneath that isn't recklessness. It's the specific quality of a man who is willing to stand fully in what he is, without apologizing for the space it takes up. Machiavelli observed that the men who commanded genuine respect weren't the ones who made themselves easy to be around, they were the ones who made themselves impossible to ignore. That quality isn't manufactured through style or posture. It comes from a man who has done the internal work of actually becoming something. Someone with direction, with conviction, with a standard he applies to himself before he applies it to anyone else. Women don't fall for masculinity as an idea. They fall for what it feels like to be near it. The steadiness of it. The quiet certainty of a man who doesn't need the room to shift around him because he carries his own gravity. Simone de Beauvoir wrote that one is not born, but rather becomes. That becoming, deliberate, demanding, and deeply personal, is exactly what real masculinity is built from. Not inherited, not performed, built. Daily, in the choices nobody else sees. Number 7. The man she can't replace is the man she can't control. Every woman, at some point in a relationship, will test whether she can move a man off his center. Not always consciously, not always with any particular intention behind it. But the testing happens, through mood shifts, through small challenges, through moments designed to see whether this man's sense of self depends on her emotional approval or exists entirely independent of it. The man who passes that test doesn't pass it by being cold or refusing to engage. He passes it by remaining exactly himself, warm but unmoved, present but not destabilized, engaged but not desperate for the outcome to go a specific way. That steadiness is what creates irreplaceability. And irreplaceability, the specific feeling a woman gets when she understands that this man cannot be easily found elsewhere, is one of the deepest foundations of lasting attraction. Bell Hooks wrote in All About Love that the moment we choose to love, we begin to move toward freedom. What she understood is that genuine love, the kind that deepens rather than fades, requires two people who are each fully themselves. Not two people where one has quietly dissolved into the other's preferences and moods and expectations. Machiavelli observed that the men who maintained their position longest weren't the ones who gave the most, they were the ones who remained the most consistently themselves, regardless of external pressure. In a relationship, that consistency translates into something a woman feels but rarely articulates directly. She can't fully predict him, can't fully manage him, can't fully place him in a box she's already seen before. And that unknowability, that sense that there is always something more to discover, keeps her returning in a way that complete familiarity never sustains. Otto Weininger observed that the man of genius is he who can make himself comprehensible to all, who can see all things clearly. The man who sees himself clearly, who knows exactly what he is and refuses to pretend otherwise for anyone, is the man nobody can quite replace. Not because he tries to be irreplaceable, because he simply refuses to be anything other than exactly what he is. And that refusal, that quiet, complete, unashamed refusal, that's what she'll remember long after everything else fades. 7 laws. None of them about manipulation. All of them pointing toward the same truth that most men spend years circling without ever landing on directly. The version of you that women can't stop thinking about isn't a better-looking version, isn't a wealthier version. It's simply the version that stopped shrinking, stopped over-explaining, stopped handing his power away in exchange for approval that was never going to arrive through that door anyway. frame, ease, edges, silence, feeling over logic, masculinity that doesn't apologize, and a quiet, unshakable refusal to be replaced by becoming someone else. That's the gap. And closing it doesn't require a new wardrobe or a better opening line. It requires becoming, genuinely, deliberately, uncomfortably becoming, the man you already sense you're capable of being. Now go to the comments and be honest. Drop one real thing that actually worked for you. One shift, one decision, one moment where you stopped doing what wasn't working and tried something different, and she noticed. Write it down, share it, because somewhere a man is reading these comments at midnight, quietly, trying to figure this out. And what you already know might be exactly what changes everything for him. Like this video. Share it with every man who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because what's coming next will go even deeper than this.